What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to episode 61 of the U.S.S. Enterprise D tutorial. I'm Zero Elite, and I just want to thank you very much for tuning in today's episode. And if you haven't, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, helping me and supporting the channel. I can't thank you enough for that. Today we got about just over a 25-minute episode. We're going to be doing just a little bit of detailing on the primary shuttle bay, and then we're going to be working our way down, just doing slight more detail in the battle bridge, and then we're going to be focusing on the turbo lift, the primary turbo lift. So without further ado, we're just going to jump right into this today. And see, I'm counting out the very center. I've already got a guideline here. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm starting to separate out, because we need to figure out our center here, and now we're just going to do some detailing for the 1701. I wanted to throw this down to see how much I was gonna have to work with for detailing, but we're gonna ultimately end up shifting the 1701 back slightly at a later point because well, the NCC 1701 I should say, because I'm not taking into account the other detailing that I'm gonna have to do for the primary shuttle bay. But still, um, regardless, we have enough room to do this, so I mean that'll be good. Um, one thing we're going to have to figure out is how to do the N, because at the scale going 4x4, I believe, N will end up being a 4x3. It's going to be ever so slightly smaller than the other ones. Oh no, I stand corrected. It was 4x3. I don't know why I thought the um, horizontal line was 4x4, but no, it's 4x3. So I'm going to slightly shift up. Instead of having it come all the way down on the hull line, we're just going to bring it one up. Now, you're doing a straight horizontal version of the NCC. That's relatively easy to do. It's really when you have to do it curves, that's the pain in the butt. But we'll figure out a way to make it work. When we come to doing that for the saucer section, I think ultimately what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take the previous template that I used when I did the Disco Era Enterprise and apply that to this build, because it always takes a little bit of finagling. That's the one thing that I don't have a set process down on how to do it. I think what I'm going to have to do is really sit down and figure out the steps that need to be taken on that in order to do it in the right fashion. And see, and even that, it looks a little bit funky because I ended up shifting to a 3x3 on the lettering, but the N is one wider, so it's a 3x4. But with that being said, it doesn't necessarily look bad. If we made it one smaller on the N, it would end up looking like an H. We got to close in this wall here. And this was the one thing that I didn't go over when we were doing the tutorial for the interior walls of the primary shuttle bay, because that was the only portion of the capture that I'm aware of that I missed, that I didn't record. But that's okay. Like, I'm going to show you guys how to do those walls up, because I'm ultimately going to end up redoing those walls. I kind of wanted to have it going at an angle, as you can see there, but what I end up doing is just have it going flat back, or straight back, I should say. You can see that's why I put those pillars in there on each side, so this way I can see where the cut is. And I'm just literally looking right above me to see where that cut line is. That's how I determine that. So I always say, you know, when in doubt, go with the cut line. And that's what we're doing. I think the only problem where I have it, it's directly below. I'm gonna move it back by one because it looks like it's not sticking out far enough. Because I almost feel like maybe the shuttle bay doors kind of goes out at an angle, maybe a little bit, and I think it's gonna look a little bit nicer when we move it back at least by one. That'll look pretty good. And I think we're actually gonna end up replacing that gray line with a yellow line or a blue line. That's just really a template for right now, kind of giving us a gust of something to go off of, and then we can always go back and see what's needed and add to it at a later time. See here, now we're gonna widen up our blue squares a little bit and bring it all the way down to the cut line. Let's zoom out and see how that looks. That surprisingly doesn't look half bad. I think we're gonna leave it like that. Yeah, today we're gonna kind of be going back and forth, working over, going over different things. I end up doing that from time to time, especially when I'm not dead set on what I want to do. I'll kind of jump back and forth just a little bit, um, and work on stuff that I'm set that I know that I'm going to that I or at least I know what I want to do on it anyway. Yeah, making those blue blocks bigger, it makes the rest of the ship look a little bit bigger too. I like that. All right, now and this is the episode we're going to be adding in the orange doors. I think we'll do it to the left ones. We're on the battle bridge deck right now. We're going to close off one of the rooms to get into the battle bridge. We'll leave the other one opened. And this middle one here, this is going to be the side that's closed. We need to get rid of that gray block in the middle and swap that out for white terracotta. But those orange doors, I mean, that works pretty well. I really like how those orange doors look. Because I forget which season they kind of changed them to that faint orange, but certain that's something that they did because the cream ones would have worked if we didn't have the outline for our door in cream. Um, and that's one of the challenges on Minecraft because, like on the real ship, I mean, you can have that the frame and the doors be the same color, and then you have the shapes to define the two. As opposed to Minecraft, you use the same. Unless you actually build it out back by one, it's just going to bleed in with it. And see, now we're just facading out every single deck, even if we don't use every deck. This way, as we're going deck to deck, it all matches up. Yeah, see, that looks fantastic. That's exactly what we want. This was something I tried to do on my 2016 Enterprise A, but I didn't come up with this method to build out my turbo lifts until the ship was already done. And at that point, it can become very difficult to make those changes. That's why I say it's always so imperative to build out this stuff beforehand, so this way the rest of the ship can be molded off of your corridors and off of your turbo lifts. Now our main turbo lift, I'm going to bring this back just by one. I think we might end up doing that with every single level here. And the reason I'm bringing it back only by one, I would have liked to bring it back maybe by one more, but this is as far back as we can go. And I'm doing this so that way when we go down to the bottom deck, when we go into engineering, we have just a little bit more room to work with. But now, since we're doing this, we're going to have to slightly tweak everything as we're going up, or I should say as we're going down. We're going to have to move everything back by one. Which really, it's not really a big deal, you know. I could have left it where it was, but to be able to do what I want to do, I have to shift this whole thing back by one. And I'd rather do this now rather than later, because that's why, like I said, we do this later, we might have so much of the ship built out that it's going to become a problem. You know what I mean? Um, like as example, my Enterprise A. To do this, I would have had to basically rebuild the entire lower section of the ship just to have this facade turbo lift built out this way. That's one of the reasons why I'm actually excited to go back and rebuild that ship, because once we hit 1,000 subscribers, that's going to be something that we are going to do. But I feel like I've learned a lot since I built that ship, and I'm really looking forward to applying what I've learned to that build. And these are going to be things that you're going to pick up too. Nobody's going to, walk into Minecraft and build a ship perfect for the very first time. It just doesn't work that way. There's always some type of learning curve. There's always something that you can do better. Even now, as I build these ships, I'm always learning something new. Um, and I've found that if you take your time, you plan this stuff out beforehand, you're less likely to make these mistakes where you have to backtrack. And even then, when you still take your time, there's still adjustments that are just that are just needed. You know what I mean? And that's where, like I've said in my tutorials in the past, if you're looking for like a perfect tutorial that shows you everything you need to do on the first try, you're really not going to get that with me. And one of the reasons why I try to showcase my mistakes is so hopefully you can learn from these mistakes too, and avoid and hopefully learn something, but also avoiding having to do it too. Because that's one of my main goals with this channel too. I'm trying to build these ships in a way that you guys are doing them with me, and hopefully you're learning a thing or two while we're building them. Um, because I get asked that question time to time. What's your method for doing these ships? How do you do it? And I'm trying to go over all that stuff, and hopefully that stuff, the information that I'm giving, hopefully it's good. And but so far, I've actually had pretty positive response with it. Really haven't had too many issues. Every once in a while, here and there, I'll have somebody that they're just not getting it. And if that's happening with you, my best recommendation would be just stop what you're well, not stop what you're doing, but take a break and look at what you're doing that's wrong. That's something that I do too. Um, I'll I'll go back to my other builds and I'll just walk through them, because I feel like even just walking through them again, um, I'm looking at what I did that time, and I try to avoid, like, I look for the things that I did wrong basically, and I try to avoid doing that again, if that makes sense. And I try to think of, like, okay, like this happened to me on this case, how do I avoid that from happening? Prime example, like I couldn't fully facade out my turbo lifts on the Enterprise A. how can I avoid that from happening in the future? Well, the easiest solution to that is build out your turbo lifts beforehand. So this way, when you go and you flesh out the rest of your ship, you can figure out workarounds for all that stuff. Because what ultimately ended up happening was that my warp core that I have on my ship on the Enterprise A prevented me from really building this thing out the way I wanted to, because the um, turbo lift would have intersected with it. Now, with that being said, if I come back, when I come back again to rebuild this thing, I'm probably going to end up building a different warp core. I'm going to build something a little bit closer to the Star Trek Into Darkness warp core. Because what I did for the Enterprise A build, I kind of made like a mix between the two. And it was cool to do it, and that build's done now. But when I go back and do it again, I'm going to do it differently, just for the sake of doing it differently, at least in that area. There's probably going to be a lot of things that I do very similar, but there's going to be a lot of things that I change too. Um, and that's just, going from build to build and trying different things and learning a better process in which to do it. And see, now that we've moved this back by one, we're going to have just one more block to work with where we can cover that wall up a little bit more and just have a little bit more to play with, which will be, it'll work out nice. And I got to switch those blocks out from the blue to cyan on those lower decks. There we go. Yes, I messed up on this lower deck here. I used blue for the flooring instead of cyan. And that can happen, Even if you're paying attention, it's easy to make a mistake. That's why it's always a good idea just to go back and double check your work. Because especially when you're working on a ship this scale, it's so easy to overlook something. Where even if you're paying attention, you can just easily do a different color palette like we just did there. But at least I caught it early enough to where it's not going to mess up this build at all. And see, we're rocking. We're getting a lot of this done, moving this turbo lift back. And this will be fantastic for us too, because now when we come back to do the warp core, or not necessarily the warp core, but engineering in general, um, a lot of this will be prepped out, so we won't have to make any more adjustments to the turbo lift. At this point, we'll just be building out that lower deck. Now, of course, we got to throw our ladder down again. Didn't actually realize how much of this episode was going to be spent working on this turbo lift, but it's all good. I'd rather show everything than skip over something. But as we continue on in this tutorial series, I'm curious to see how many episodes this is going to go. Because I still have a ton of work left to do on the interior myself. And there's a lot of stuff that I still want to do. And see what we can do right there, that top row there. We could have actually left that empty and cut it with half slabs in the front. That might have actually looked a little bit better than what we had. Which is what we're ultimately going to do. Yeah, and see with that orange, I mean, that looks great. That's very next generation. I love how that looks. And I think for our intersections, we're gonna bring it down by one. Because I know that the hallways themselves are 3 high, but at least for the intersections and when we're walking through doorways, we're going to have it 2 high. That looks a little bit better, I think. And I probably should remove this gray block here, even though we're not going to be building on this deck per se. We might come back and do it. But I'm still going to repeat the same process. There we go. We're just going to do that same thing going down. Now we're on the Battle Bridge deck. We're just moving everything back by one pretty much. Well, not everything, but at least the main pillar in the middle and then adding a row in the front. And this is where I got the idea to do the half slabs in the front. See, that looks so much better. One of the good things, though, with all the experimenting that we're doing today and in future episodes, that when we do more next generation airships, it's not going to be nearly as hard to do it because we're going to have the palette in place. Matter of fact, I'm probably going to end up coming back maybe at some point and doing a slight refresher maybe on the Cerritos. Because that's something I talked about doing when I was working on the Cerritos, that I'm waiting for them to show more of the ship to give me a justification to flesh out more of it, because there's still a good portion of the Cerritos that I never fully fleshed out. And that was just due to having a limited amount of content to go off of. But I'm hopeful that as more episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks comes out, that I'll have that material to go off of, hopefully. And if I don't, if they never show enough stuff to redo it, at least if anything, I'll redo the corridors, I think, and the turbo lift, because that was the one thing that I was never, I wasn't fully satisfied with it. And it wasn't until we got to the Enterprise D that I really started to flesh out um, not only the turbo lifts but also the corridors. But I just reverted back to what worked. I used the main template that I had in place for my Enterprise A, and I just kind of ran with it. Yeah, and see, I don't know what it is, but these doorways being 3 high, it looks like it's too much, and that's another reason too why I'm bringing it down by one. And see, what I was going to do there, I was going to facade out, maybe looking forward that I can have a deck, or at least a facade for a doorway, but it's going to be kind of hard to do that unless I replace what I have. Because we can't go any further than that, because then we're building outside the ship. At least we have a little bit of a lip, kind of flesh out the lowest deck, which goes into engineering. It's looking pretty good. Yeah, see, I like that enough that I'm going to go in now with all my archways. See, and I have it there, but I don't have it on this side. So that's something that you can do too at all your intersections. You can add that in, at least for the straightaways. I don't think I had that added in for the curved one, curved corridors just yet, but for sure on the straightaways. That looks pretty good. So we got a little bit of work done today. Kind of feels like a slow crawl because we're backtracking just a little bit, but we're still getting some work done on this thing. You know, but at the end of the day, this is a beast build, and it's taking a little bit of time. But anyway, I think that's going to wrap us up today. I just want to thank everybody again for tuning into today's episode, and don't forget, you can always catch my Minecraft episodes dropping Tuesdays through Thursdays. And if you have any questions regarding today's episode, or you have any builds that you want to see me do, or just to say, hey, drop a comment below. Definitely love hearing from everybody. And of course, well, no, not of course. I think that's it. So I just want to thank everybody again for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next episode. And as always, what did you make today in Minecraft? All right, I'll catch you on the next episode.